Good morning, good morning. Monday, 6th of July. This is Burnout at Breakfast. I am your host, Kelly Swingler. Some of you may be a little bit tired this morning if you had a late night. I wasn't planning on staying up. I was in bed, but everybody in my house decided they would be waking up instead. So we'll see how we go today, energy-wise. But this morning, of course, my screen is now going all over the place. Bear with me 1 second. We're back in this tech. Good morning. This has every live, doesn't it? Every single live. But we are, as we mentioned last week, talking about how do you know if your client is at burnout or if it's just stress or overwhelm? How do you know if your client is at burnout or is it just stress or overwhelm? As always, give me a hello. Let me know that you're there, wherever it is that you are watching from or joining from, whether you are joining live or whether you are watching on the replay. Give me a hello. And as always, if you've got questions or comments, make sure that you pop them below. Any questions, if they're not necessarily relevant to this morning's session, I'll add them into the next one. Next week, I'm going to have a slightly different Burnout at Breakfast for you. It's going to be at a slightly different time. I will tell you all about that at the moment. But if you've got questions, I'm going to answer them for you in later weeks. Last week's Q&A seemed to go down really well. I think what did we say? We had kind of 7 question categories for you last week. And I think we got about three or four questions answered, didn't we? But I say this one had come up quite a lot. So I said I'd give more detail on this one today. So that is what we are doing. And as I said, the topic for this morning is how do you know if your client is at burnout or if it is just stress or overwhelm? And I think this one is a really good question, right? Because if I'm honest, this is where a lot of coaches can begin to doubt themselves, or they may get a little bit, should we say, kind of too certain about what it is that's facing them, and actually their coaching, the way they approach things, could actually lead to either more stress, more overwhelm, or deeper burnout. And we don't want to miss burnout. I will actually, whilst I've got you here, most coaches miss the signs of burnout. And if you want to know if you are equipped to be able to deal with that, I've got this very, very short kind of assessment here for you. Let's pop that in the comments for you for when we get going this morning. 3 minutes, 12 questions. Find out if you understand the signs of burnout and if you are equipped to coach it. Let's get that shared for you, so you can get completing that as we go. Okay, right. So we don't want to miss burnout. Excuse me. This isn't a good start, is it? It's better not be hay fever coming. Anybody else experiencing that? Has been, I think, like twice in my life, but we'll see. Okay, right. So we don't want to miss burnout, but equally, you don't want to label every exhausted client as being at burnout, right? But I also want you to remember that as coaches, we are not here to diagnose. Right, I'm going to repeat that bit for you again. Okay, we don't want to miss burnout, but we also don't want to label every single exhausted client as being at burnout. Let's stop here for a moment, shall we, and just talk about this part, because again, I think when we see this all over our social feeds, when we see people talking about burnout as a word, as a phrase, as a term, seems to have become a catch-all for everything. Right? If people are stressed, oh my God, I'm so burnt out. If people are overwhelmed, if they're tired, if they're exhausted, if they are struggling at work, if they need help, if they need support, if they need to be seen or heard, or if they need additional resources, or like they're just not feeling it today, burnout or I'm feeling burned out seems to have become the catch-all for all of those things. And burnout is very specific. Okay, we'll see lots of people, again, I see it constantly all over my LinkedIn feed, right? Everybody seems to have an opinion about what burnout is or isn't. Your feeds are probably being flooded with exactly the same post, right? Burnout isn't X, it's Y. Burnout isn't Y, it's X. We're seeing all of these things. Are they genuine posts? Are they AI created? Are they mirroring what people are trying to share about it? I don't know. Has burnout become a bit of a buzzword? Yes. Are we seeing people that have never studied burnout, never really understood it, doing long posts about what it is and giving hints and tips and tools and hacks and all of these ways that we need to be overcoming burnout? Absolutely, yes. And I'm not going to get off my soapbox with this one, but we need to understand, right? If you were, and I've said this before, right? Last year, I had to undergo a total hysterectomy and oophorectomy, right? I've had 35 years of living with endometriosis and at least 12 years of living with adenomyosis, right? Crippling pain, lots and lots of it. It's been impacting me mentally, physically, emotionally. Last year, did 25 days work, physically could not move, like the pain and everything that my body was experiencing. 15 months, it was almost like my body had completely shut down. I would not be, I share my story. And again, I encourage all of you to share your burnout story, but I'm not out there positioning myself as an expert in endometriosis. I'm not out there positioning myself as an expert in adenomyosis. I'm not out there positioning myself as an expert in hysterectomy or the whole, kind of hormonal issues and juggling and balances that we need to go through. I'll share my story. I'll say, this is what I went through. This is what I'm doing. But I'm not positioning myself as an expert. And that's something that I've lived with, right, for 35 and 12 years. And yet when it comes to burnout, seemingly everybody thinks it's okay to position themselves as an expert and start giving advice and hints and tips and hacks and just all of this stuff out there. And I think be really, really careful. So kind of jump off my soapbox again this morning so we can actually get into the session. We've got 20 minutes left and there's loads that I want to cover with you. But I do think this is an important part, right? We don't want to be labeling every single exhausted client at being at burnout, but also as a coach, your role is not to diagnose. Leave the diagnosis for the medical practitioners, right? Or the professionals that know what they're talking about. Again, I've been in this space for 12 years. I have trained doctors and medical professionals in understanding what burnout is, the impact that burnout is having. I've trained them in burnoutology and how to support people in getting people back to work. I am still not qualified to diagnose somebody at burnout. And yet a lot of you are out there like, I experienced it once and I'm going to tell you that you're at burnout. Can we just stop that, please? Right, off the soapbox, okay? So for the next less than 20 minutes now, I want to give you, I suppose, a different way of thinking about the differences between stress and burnout and overwhelm, right? And I don't want to get, it's not just a checklist, although I do want to give you, I think we're going to look at it from the point of view of patterns, right? So it's not a checklist, it's not a diagnostic tool, but it is a way of observing your clients that as a coach will hopefully then help you to ask better questions and to be able to make better coaching decisions. Because the reality is this, right? Stress, overwhelm, and burnout, they do share a huge amount of symptoms. But these symptoms can also overlap things like autoimmune conditions, hormonal imbalances, all sorts of stuff that's going on, right? So some of these patterns will look like, some of the symptoms, the shared symptoms will look like fatigue, could look like poor concentration, forgetfulness, irritability. It could be sleep problems. It could be the inability to make decisions. It could be reduced motivation, emotional reactions, right? But if we simply just compare like a symptoms list, then it's probably no wonder that as coaches, right, we start to become confused. So I suppose how I want us to kind of position it this morning, right, is rather than asking which one is this, right? Is it stress? Is it burnout? Is it overwhelm? I think actually the better question that we can be asking as coaches is what pattern are we seeing, right? What pattern is unfolding? What pattern is presenting? Okay, so I think if we think about it from the process of patterns, now I'm a pattern spotter, right? I'm a dot joiner. I still love to see all these patterns, but I also think this is like a huge skill that we have as coaches, right? We're looking for the patterns. If we're naturally curious, and again, I'd like to think that most of us as coaches are, if we've got that natural curiosity, then it's easy for us, or easier for us, to be able to spot these patterns, right? So let's start with stress. Now, stress is part of us being human, right? And we need it. We see at least 3 times a year, lots and lots of coaches will start positioning and start, kind of promoting, because we want clients to be stress-free, right? Let's have a stress-free year. Let's have a stress-free end to the year. Let's have a stress-free summer. Let's have stress-free. We don't actually want to be stress-free, right? We do not want to be stress-free. Now, we might not call stress, but actually we need drive, we need adrenaline, we need passion, we need enthusiasm, we need things to get us out of bed in the morning. We need things to help us get the promotion. We need things to help us get over the finish line, right? All of those things, we might not think of them as stress, but actually we do need stress. It's part of, like I said, what helps us to get out of bed in the morning and keep us motivated and keep us going, right? So we don't want to be stress free. We also don't want like toxic, unhealthy levels of stress. But we need to kind of stop thinking about stress free. We can use stress to our advantage, right? So stress is part of being human. But let's kind of look at let's dig into a bit of this stress, right? So our nervous system, by design, is there to respond to challenge, right? So sometimes that will be a deadline. It might be caring responsibilities. It might be illness. Sometimes it might be financial pressure, right? But it's not automatically harmful. And as I've just said, right, sometimes the stress helps us, most of the time, right? Stress helps us to perform. And the important thing is this: stress usually has periods of recovery, right? Periods of recovery. So even if someone has a difficult week, a holiday, a weekend, a good night's sleep, right? Maybe even like a reduction in pressure. All of those things can help with like restoring capacity, right? Can help to reset. It doesn't necessarily mean it's always going to be perfect. But if we have had a stressful week and we're able to switch off at the weekend, we might feel by the end of that weekend that we start to feel much better. And that's important, right? That feeling of I feel much better is really, really important. So what about overwhelm? Well, overwhelm, again, right, isn't about like the nervous system failing, right? Overwhelm is about the demand exceeding the capacity in that moment. Right, think about it that way. Overwhelm is about demand exceeding capacity in that moment. So imagine, right, that you're trying to carry 20 bags of shopping. The bags are not necessarily the problem, right? But it's just that your arms simply can't carry everything that's in them. Now that's overwhelm, right? Too many demands, too many decisions, too many competing priorities. So of course, what helps with that is we need to reduce the demands. We might want to think about simplifying or delegating or prioritizing. And once those pressures then begin to reduce, many people, like we've got with the stress, right? Many people will begin functioning well again. But actually, burnout is different. Burnout isn't simply more stress, right? It's not just being busy. Now, in some of the other sessions, I'm not going to go hugely into the specifics of burnout with you this morning. I've covered those in previous lives. But this morning, I want to talk to you about why we need to spend, right, less time looking at the symptoms and more time looking at the patterns. So I want to share with you in the next kind of 12 minutes, I'm going to get going, aren't I? But I want to very, very quickly talk to you about 5 patterns, right, that we can look for that help us to differentiate between the stress, the burnout, and the overwhelm. Okay. So the first pattern is about recovery, right? Recovery. So a question that you can ask here as coaches, and it's an incredibly simply one, right, is what happens when you stop? Right? What happens when you stop? What happens after a weekend off? What happens after annual leave? What happens after time away from work? Does that person, does your client, does that individual come back feeling like energized and restored and better again? Or do they come back saying, right, I'm still exhausted. I need another week off. It didn't make any difference. Because that can tell you more than asking how tired they are. As we've already talked about in that intro, right? Stress and overwhelm can improve with recovery. They can improve with that time off, but a burnout often doesn't. So the first pattern is about recovery. The second pattern then is about capacity. So another question that we can ask, right, compared with 6 months ago, what can you no longer do? Right, notice I'm not asking what they're struggling with today, but I'm interested in direction, right? Are they tolerating less? Are some of the small tasks that they need to do now feeling absolutely enormous and just too much for them? Are decisions feeling harder to make? Are maybe some of the conversations and interactions rather that they're having feeling draining? Are they maybe cancelling plans? Are they avoiding people? Do they need more isolation, right? Need more silence after what I suppose what you'd normally consider like an ordinary interaction, right? Are they like too much peopling? I'm definitely one where too much peopling can definitely push me into this space. Okay, so capacity. So it could be tasks, it could be people, it could be stuff to do, it could be thoughts. Burnout will often involve this shrinking in capacity, right? The entire world will become smaller. And I talk about kind of two things, right? It's almost addiction to the busyness, to the stuff, to the doing, to the constantly going, but then withdrawing from life. Like the people, the things, the tasks, the hobbies, the stuff that used to kind of energize and make you feel better, right? The world automatically becomes smaller. And again, that is a pattern. So our second pattern is about capacity, right? The third pattern then is about identity, right? Sense of self. And this is one that I hear constantly. If you've heard me talk about the burnout equation, you know, this is a really, really key part in part of this burnout equation, right? People aren't simply saying that they're tired. What they're talking about, the language that they use, the words that they're going to be using in sessions as they kind of, you know, they're presenting, they're talking to you, they're showing up. They're going to be saying things like I don't recognize myself. I don't recognize the person that's staring back at me in the mirror anymore. I've lost my confidence. I've lost my spark. I don't know who I am anymore. And they are very, very different comments and very, very different wording other than that, like, I've just had a really stressful week. What the clients are describing to you is a loss of connection with themselves. And as coaches, maybe leaders, managers, whoever it is that you're joining me live this morning, we need to be able to hear this, right? This loss of self, this not being able to manage yourself is so common in burnout, right? Again, burnout equation, toxicity minus sense of self equals burnout. So our third pattern is identity. Right, pattern 4 then that we need to be looking for is about the body. Very, very often, the body will notice, the body's giving signs, it's giving all of the cues way before the mind does, right? Now, this could be sleep changes. It might look like constant illness, right? Again, this was a thing for me, right? Every time I stopped working, if I did stop for a weekend, right, I'm like, oh, you know, I'm just gonna, I don't know, I'm gonna sunbathe in the garden this weekend. If I did that, just stopped, I'd become ill. If I actually switched off during holiday, I would become ill. If I stopped over Christmas holiday, I would become ill. Right? I could guarantee you, I think I mentioned this again a couple of weeks ago, right? I could guarantee, like clockwork, come the 27th of December, right? I host all the family for Christmas. It's my son's birthday a week before Christmas, right? My twin sons, it's their birthday a week before Christmas. When they were younger, we didn't used to put the tree up or anything until after their birthday. So their birthday would be on the 18th. Then we kind of go into like, let's get the house decorated, tree up, do all the stuff. Christmas Eve would be all the baking. Christmas Day, Boxing Day, I would be hosting. 27th of January, we'd head into town. We go to the John Lewis sale. And I would guarantee you by 2-3 o'clock on the 27th, I would be done because I would stop. I would allow myself to take a breather. I would stop. And that would result in probably the next 4 days of me in bed. But I'd managed to get myself out to go and, you know, kind of celebrate for New Year's Eve again, stick my face on, stick my dress on. We'd either be hosting a party or going to a party, taking the boys out, house parties, all of that kind of stuff. But like clockwork, I could guarantee that come the 27th of December, that would be me in bed for the next 4 days, just like literally unable to move. If we went on holiday, if I spent, you know, too much time relaxing by the pool or with a book, I guarantee you I'd finish that holiday. So what did I stop doing? I stopped stopping. That was the body giving me a signal, right? And again, when it comes to burnout, lots of us, well, I keep constantly getting ill if I stop, so I just stop stopping. It's a sign the body knows before the brain has been able to catch up, right? So frequent illness, digestive problems, it could look like headaches, muscle pain, right? Particularly with this muscle pain, particularly in the hips and in the shoulders, right? Our psoas muscle, this gorgeous muscle that we have that comes sort of down the bottom of our back and into our hips, right? When we're in chronic stress constantly, right? That psoas muscle tightens because it thinks, right? Again, physiologically, neurologically, biologically, got lots and lots of chemicals that go down the body, right? So lots of people will feel tension and stress in their shoulders. Lots of people will start to feel it kind of lower back and into their hips. This psoas muscle kind of clinches. We think like a coiled spring, right? It starts to spring, thinking that any minute now we're gonna sprint, right? So it kind of coils, ready to allow us to kind of run into that sprint. Most of us are not getting ready for a sprint, but our body doesn't know that because all of the signs and all of the symptoms are telling us that. So if we've got muscle pains, muscle aches, really starting to feel tense in the shoulders, right? If you're starting to wear your shoulders as earrings, they're kind of way up here, lower back pain, as I said, kind of hip pain, could also be brain fog even, poor memory, or stuff like reduced concentration. Again, could be like difficulty in being able to make decisions. And it could be simple decisions, right? What are we going to have for dinner? How many of us are sick and tired of the what are we having for dinner tonight conversation, right? We just can't think about it. It becomes too overwhelming. We just can't do it. So again, right, none of the things that I've listed there prove burnout. But if we look at them together, they begin to tell a story. So this fourth pattern is about the body. And then pattern 5 is when trying harder stops working, right? When trying harder stops working. Again, this is a huge, can't get my words out this morning, can I? But this is a huge clue if we start to see this, right? So this is when we hit, like, the client will have tried everything, right? The person sat in front of us will be telling us they've tried everything. They've had holidays, they've reduced their hours, they've started exercising again, they're walking, they're eating well, they're meditating, they're journaling, they're trying to improve their sleep, right? They're telling you they're doing everything that they are supposed to do, and yet they're still declining. They still feel like they're shrinking. They still feel like they're not coping. They still feel like they're not doing what they need to do. And that's a particular one where we need to get more curious, right? This is where my curiosity comes in and again, kind of dot joining as we start to go. So what questions should you be asking as a coach, right? So instead of asking, I hate this one anyway, right? Are you burned out? I hate burned out as a term. For many of you, if you've seen it, right? Burned out, hate it, right? Are you at burnout? That's my preference. I know when it comes to language, we have different ways of doing it. But instead of asking, right, are you burned out? We need to be asking things like when did you first notice that something had changed? Right? What did you stop doing? What takes more effort now than it used to? What restores your energy? What doesn't restore your energy anymore? What feels different about you? Because all of those questions will reveal patterns. Right? They will reveal patterns. Now, again, I'm going to caveat words of caution here for the final couple of minutes that I've got with you. Total word of caution. And this is genuinely, like, really important. This is where we started. This is where we're going to finish. Your role is not to diagnose burnout. You are not here to diagnose burnout. Your role is not even to prove burnout. Your role as the coach is to become exceptionally skilled at noticing when your client's experience is no longer in like ordinary stress. We've done this a lot this morning, right? But again, I think it's really important, right? Sometimes you might suspect burnout. Sometimes you might suspect overwhelm. Sometimes you might even discover or suspect grief, right? Trauma, depression, physical illness, hormonal changes, ADHD, autism, ADHD, autoimmune conditions, hormonal changes, right? There can be an overlap with all of them. And this is why it's important for all of us, right, to maintain our morals and our ethics. We can stay curious. We're not here to diagnose. And it's not our role to say, this is where I think you are. So you might not know in the first session whether this is stress or burnout or overwhelm, and that's going to be totally, totally okay. Burnout informed coaches and the master burnout coaches that I train, right? We know how to start coaching relationships safely, right? We start with state and we start with safety. You may not be burnout informed. Again, that's okay. But you do need to be able to understand that burnout will reveal itself through these repeated observations, right? Through the patterns. And these patterns will become clearer, right? The recovery, the time off, the boundaries that you might be talking to them about, they're going to stop working. The capacity will continue to keep shrinking. Their identity is going to continue to shift or be lost completely. Body is going to be speaking louder. And when you see all of those things, when you can join all of those dots together, that's when you begin to see the whole picture. Right. So one thing that I want to leave you with, Sarah, I'm going to leave you with one question. So rather than asking, right, is my client at burnout? I want you to try asking this one instead, right? What patterns, shall I pop this for you in the comments? Let me pop this one for you in the comments so that you've got it, right? This is the question that I want to kind of leave you like to think about, right? What patterns am I seeing that tell me about their capacity to recover? That's the one that I want you to think about. Because when you begin observing recovery, right, instead of simply collecting symptoms, you will automatically start coaching very, very differently. And in my experience, that's where burnout informed coaching really, begins, right? There we go. I'm 1 minute over, but I'm going to say thank you very much for joining me. This has been Burnout of Breakfast. As I said, next week is going to be a slightly different one. Next week, I'm going to be joined with somebody. I'm going to be joined by one of the Burnout Academy coaches. I'm not going to introduce her just yet because I know she's not been 100% over the last week, but if she's all right, I'm going to be joined by one of the Burnout Academy's Burnout Informed coaches last week. She's also a founding member of the Burnout Coach Collective. So we'll be with you next Monday. Instead of 8 o'clock, we're going to be live at 9:30. If today's session, right, has raised more questions than it's answered, that's probably a good sign for you, right? Because burnout is really simple. And actually, I'd probably be quite concerned if you thought that this has answered every single one of your questions. But next time you sit with a client who's exhausted, right, please, please, please do not rush to decide whether it is stress or overwhelm or burnout, right? Slow down. Start with state, start with safety, stay curious, look for the patterns, because in the patterns, it's where hopefully you will begin to find all of the answers that you need. Again, as I said at the beginning, right, most coaches miss the signs of burnout. I have already popped the link for you for that very short quiz and assessment below. I'm going to go and see you next week. I think I need to go and put my teeth in because I've got lots of sessions that I'm doing today, and for whatever reason, my words aren't coming out this morning. So I'm going to go. I'm going to go and find a space to slow down somewhere. But thank you very, very much for joining me. Again, if you have got more questions, do check out the Burnout Academy. In fact, let me pop the link for that for you in there as well, shall I? Burnout Academy. We have got the Master Burnout Coach. We've got the Burnout Informed Coach, and we have got the Burnout Coach Collective. If you do want to find out more about how you can be a burnout informed coach, how you can be a master burnout coach, or anything that you can do to keep you, to give you all of the answers that you need, right? Burnout Coach Collective, we meet every week. We'll do coaching clinics and all sorts of wonderful stuff within there. Master classes. Learn it. I'm going to go and put my teeth in before I mess up the rest of the day. But thank you very much for joining. Thank you for watching. I hope that has been helpful. Genuinely, I just want to know that we're all doing everything that we can, right, to help coaching to become safe. I absolutely believe that coaches can be like the magic ingredient, if you like, in this fight against burnout. I know that when as coaches we know what we're looking for, we can absolutely make a difference for our clients. Go and enjoy the rest of your Monday. Go and have an amazing week. I'll be back with you next time of 9:30. All being well, I'll be with you with a guest. We're going to talk about some of this stuff and what it looks like in practice. I will say thank you very much for joining. I'll see you all next Monday. Go have an amazing week. It's going to get hot again here in the UK, so make sure that you are drinking and staying as cool as you could, drinking lots of water and staying as cool and as safe as you can. I'll see all of you next week. Take care for now, everybody. Bye, bye, bye.